Picture of this meeting for me. Sun. That's the moon, right? That's the sun. That's the sun. It was like this really low dress. It's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's creepy. It's a little creepy, but it's like these doomsday Christians that they call it 4 blood moons this year.
Yeah.
The blood moons all fall under Jewish holidays. So
Good morning, everybody. Oh, that was good. I like that. Let's try. Good morning, everybody. Oh, that was even better. We could do that all day. Good morning, Edmonton. How's Edmonton this morning? Excellent. Shelter, you're good? Shelter looks, a little enthusiasm would just anything would be great. Your boss is here watching you on video, so. Okay, so we only have one really big announcement before we introduce our speaker this morning. Coverage at the shelter, downtown staff needed to help. And my good friend Brandon has said, Bill, if you have to cry to make this happen, do that. So I am. The shelter is planning their annual team building day for Wednesday, September 13th. In previous years, they had help from other departments, downtown staff, that allows them to get off site for a few hours. They're looking for 6 to 8 people to help out again this year from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Brandon, I am there for you, man. I will be there. Okay? Put me down. What's that? Yeah, that's what we're working on now. So they will train all staff helping out. They will feed them, except that they sometimes forget to pay for the food, and then I had to last year. But anyway, if you or some members of your team are able to help out, please, 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 he's begging. It's him begging. I'm just reading it. Please help. They're hoping to have coverage of a schedule of complete this work. So here's where we stand as of about 2 or 3 days ago. Kathleen Shepard is generously volunteered to run the whole thing because she's about the only one that's actually replied to this and said she'll be there. So big round of applause for Kathleen. And I know she's very capable, but I think she's going to need a little help. So put me down, Brandon. I'll come. Anybody you want from my team, just tell them I said they have to be there. We'll get them there, okay? Great. This week's speaker is Rod Sawatsky. He is the chaplain for the Stampeders and the Flames, and we are just so thrilled to have him today. And it's a unique opportunity to hear a role that some of us aren't always as familiar with as we think, what it would be like to be a chaplain on some of these teams. And it's a lot. And I've done a little bit of that, not what he's done, but I know that it's a lot. So let's give him a big round of applause and welcome him.
Well, it's a privilege to be here in Edmonton, and the shelter. Good to have you guys here. I don't know where the camera is, so I'll try and look. I'll look around. I'll pretend there's lots of people over here too. I'm not going to talk really at all about me because I just want to spend some time encouraging you. And before I even begin anything, I want to open in a word of prayer. Father, thanks so much for the privilege of being here. We've got another day to do your work, but Lord, would we learn to have an attitude of gratitude, that we would give a praise performance with the things you call us to. Amen. I want to start with a story. I'm a storyteller, and I'm going to treat you a bit like I would chapel. So, a fellow by the name of Anthony Munoz was preparing for the new season, his second season in the NFL. Anybody know Anthony Munoz? Put a hand up, a few of you. Turned out to be the greatest offensive lineman in the history of the NFL. In fact, if you played Madden football, John Madden said he was probably the greatest football player in any position ever in the history of the NFL. But this was the beginning of the second season. He had been all rookie. He had been honorable mention for all pro as an offensive lineman. But he had a problem. They're in Seattle. It's before the first game of the year. They have Bible study. We do chapel on game day. We will do the visiting chapel early in the morning and then a couple of hours before the game. But in the NFL, they often do it in the hotel, the visiting team, the night before. They have chapel. Everybody's leaving. And Anthony asked the chaplain to stick around because he has a problem. He says, I'm not sure why I'm playing. I've had great success, but I've really succeeded. I've, in fact, blown out all of my hopes and dreams as a player. I'm lacking motivation to do what I do. I'm not sure where to go with this. And the chaplain who he invited to stay was a very wise man, and they sat down, they talked through Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2. I'll just read that to you. It says, Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, which is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. By the renewing of your mind, then you'll be able to test and approve God's will, His good, pleasing, and perfect will. They talked through that. They also talked through this idea out of Ephesians chapter 2. For we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works that He prepared in advance for us to do. By the way, that word workmanship, if you're not familiar with it, is another word would be masterpiece. In fact, you're God's best work, created to do other work, to do good things in the world. But then he took Anthony into a place that Anthony had never thought, and maybe you hadn't. He said, you really need to be about giving God thanks in everything that you do. In Colossians 3:17, it says, whatever you do, whether in word or deed, do it all in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God, the Father, through Him. And then in 23, I got to take my glasses off. It says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as for working for the Lord, not for men, since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. They looked through these passages, or one of them, and I've given you a few extra, but the idea of having gratitude as you work. By the way, the work that you do, the people I'm speaking to, I'm humbled at this because you do some of God's deepest heart work, the needy. But it doesn't really matter what you do. The call of God is to give thanks in all that you do. The chaplain said to Anthony, he said, Anthony, if I were to ask you what you're most thankful for in this world, what would it be? Instantly, he goes, my mom. My dad was not around. There were 6 of us that my mother raised. She worked 3 jobs just to feed us. And if you want to have a concept of feeding these boys, Anthony Munoz is 6'6", 360 pounds, and active. You have 6 of those mouths to feed. I can't imagine the calories that would take. But he was quite heartfelt in his thoughts. He got, like I am, a bit emotional. He said, my mom, in all of that work, never missed one of my games growing up. It was unbelievable. I love my mom. He said, I'll tell you what, we need to give God thanks, but sometimes it's helpful to have a practical expression or a practical thought on on how to thank God. And he said, I want you tomorrow in the game to give thanks to God for your mom. On every play, on every down that you play, I want you to put in the kind of effort that shows your gratitude. The harder you work, the more intense you are, the better you are at your position to do what you do, the louder your thanks will be to the God who gave you your money. Motivated this way, Anthony Munoz went into the game. You got to understand, he was a good player already. But he gets down in his stance, and I got to stay by the mic so I can't actually express myself the way I normally would. But Anthony gets down, and he whispers under his breath on the first play, I thank God for my mom. Wham! And he busts open a hole that if you watch the video, the running back hesitates because he can't believe the gap he has to run through. And Anthony blocked for the quarterback and did run blocking in a way like a man possessed. They break some all-time running record in that game. But Anthony Munoz, who is double-teamed, by the end of the game is yelling at the top of his lungs, I'll save your ears. But he is yelling, I thank God for my mom! And you should see the defensive eyes on the players that have to defend. Because they can't imagine what has gone on with this man. They go on and win the game. They rush, like I can't remember, I think 280 yards. It's some ridiculous thing. And when the game is over, his coach, Coach Greg, is asked by the reporter, what did you think of Anthony Munoz's performance today? He stops. He looks at the reporter. He says, I think that was the greatest athletic performance of any football player in any position all time. He said, I have never seen anything like it. He had a new motivation. Like I told you, he went on to 11 straight All-Pro. This guy was the greatest O-lineman, but he used that motivation for the rest of his life. But he used it not just in football, and so part of my challenge to you this morning is to think through the idea of giving a praise performance. Because you see, you have certain gifts, and you've been given certain opportunities, and I know you, and you got mostly a good poker face going, and the people in the video, I don't know you at all. I can't hardly see you because you're on the screen behind me. But I know you got difficult. And I know sometimes the job you do is hard. And I know that you get up some mornings, and it's hard to be motivated. It just is. Hard to come to work when you get something else on your mind. And yet, the place that God has you is no accident. If you remember when Esther was challenged by her uncle to do something difficult, if you know your Old Testament, if not, it might be worth picking up the old dusty book and reading again. But he says to Esther, but who knows, but for such a time as this, you've been placed in this position. I believe that you are placed in this position, whether you're in the admin room, whether you're the front face dealing with your clients. You have a precious responsibility. But I don't think that you should go through, as some believers do, doing their work and yet acting like they got baptized in lemon juice. I think we need a little joy. And joy spills out when our attitude has gratitude. And quite frankly, if I might, you can't give what you don't have. And so if you want to move other people into a new place, spiritually, emotionally, relationally, mentally, you can't just tell them things or do your job. You're going to have to lead them places. And gratitude, my friends, when it spills out, when you're motivated like Anthony was, like many of the godly men and women of history, when gratitude is your calling card, things change. They just do. I have a poem that I call my life poem. I didn't write it. I read it somewhere and I memorized it, and I don't know the author, so wherever he is, he or she gets some credit. It goes like this. If you always think the way you have always thought, then you will always feel the way you've always felt. And if you always feel the way you've always felt, then you'll always do what you have always done. And if you always do what you have always done, you'll always get exactly what you've always gotten. If there is no change, there is no change. And quite frankly, it's not the thinking here that matters. It's what you think here. What you really believe. Because your belief determines your behavior. And so I would challenge you to think differently about many of the aspects of your life. It's not an accident. You are where you are, or you are who you are. God has given you you. I love that even when we make mistakes, or we've come with a wrong attitude, or we have blown it, that God goes, just come, confess, deal with it, and let's do the next right thing together. But let's do it with joy. If you ever do a study of prayer in the Bible, and I would assume you would pray. I pray every day, and I'm in places that I can't imagine that I get to be. And I certainly am not smart enough to be there. And so I go, God, give me wisdom. But when you study prayer, you know what's in the prayer, beside the prayer, and the command to pray? You know what's in there? Giving thanks. So I don't know what or who you are thankful to God for today. Most of you, I know nothing about your life. But habits are most easily formed if you start. So let me challenge you today. I want you to think through who or what you're thankful to God for. And today, in all of the mundane or difficult things that you do, as you enter into that, I want you to go, I thank God for, and remember one of His gifts, one of His many gifts. And then enter into whatever you're called to do with thankfulness, and the more effort you give, the more joy you bring, the more excellent that you are, the louder your thanks to God is. And once you finish today, try it again tomorrow. I want to give a praise performance. That's what I want to do with my life. That's why I do what I do. And I never know what's coming, but I do know who walks with me into what's there. So whether it's the murder of Mylon Hicks last year, the most difficult week I've ever had in my life, or it's the joy of leading one of my athletes to Christ, or mentoring one of them, or doing counseling and seeing them get off their own addictions that are hidden because they got money to hide stuff. Whatever that is, God walks with me. And I only give a praise performance. I will do it well. And so my prayer is that you would do it well. And I had some other things to say, but I'm going to keep it that short, and I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to ask you to take a few minutes when I'm done to think through who or what you're going to be thankful for today. I don't want this to just be a, here's some noise from the front, and out you go. I actually pray that God would move you. Father, thanks. Thank you for a holy moment where it's quiet. I pray that we would be like Anthony, that we would be like Esther, that we would be like Paul,
and the many other people that follow you and do it well. That we would give a praise performance. That we would, in our gratitude, be excellent to what you call us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Rod, on behalf of all of us here as staff, thank you for your grateful heart, your heart for God and your heart for others and the work that you do in a very public way. And I think, you've spoken to us in a way that makes us just reflect how much we have to be grateful for. And we serve here, and always opportunity to have more gratitude in what we do. We're thankful for what you've come here today, but also that you're willing to come back, and you're willing to come back to speak to our guests and to bring some of your players here. And it was scheduled for today. There's been a busy day, and a team meeting was called, but next October 30th, and you guys have seen the posters, we have tickets for 90 of the guests to come in to hear some of the players, to hear their story, their walk, their challenges in life, and how God has been there with them and what they are grateful for. So please let the guests know that that is happening on Tuesday, October the 30th. I think it's a Tuesday, and it's going to be right here, and it's great, and we're hoping that we can get something happening in Edmonton in the near future. Rod's going to be talking to the chaplain up there too and see if we can get something going. So again, please encourage the guests when you see them. So thank you, and go with praise.